Good afternoon. As you all saw earlier today, the President met with the Governor of Puerto Rico this morning to discuss the ongoing hurricane recovery efforts. The administration is working tirelessly to help our fellow citizens recover and rebuild, and we will stand with them throughout this process. It's been a while since I've had the opportunity to share a letter to the President from the podium, and I have one today that I think you'll all enjoy. This one is from Mackenzie of Dalton, Georgia. Mackenzie is 7 years old and is in the second grade, and she wrote, "Dear President Trump, I'm writing to tell you how much I appreciate all you're doing. I think you're an awesome president. In fact, I voted for you in my school election. My mom is bringing me to D.C. on spring break this year, and I'm very excited. I've never been there before, and I can't wait to see everything. I am most excited to see the White House. My mom said we have to write someone to ask to come in, and I hope we can. I know you're a busy man, but if you could meet me or at least see your office, it would make my day, and I would love to shake your hand. You're our leader, a hero, and a great man, and I can't wait to see you and help make America great again. Sincerely, Mackenzie, your biggest fan. P.S. If you would like, I can bring something to eat when I come. I've always heard food brings people together." Well, Mackenzie, I had the opportunity to share your letter with the President earlier today, and he said he would love for you to come and visit us here at the White House during spring break. I'll give you a tour personally, and if the President is here, he'd love to meet you as well. Finally, you're very right about food bringing people together, and so the press staff would like to invite you to have lunch here in the Navy Mess downstairs in the West Wing. We look very much forward to your visit and hope that you'll be in touch so that we can make sure that that happens. On a more serious note, we've had a lot of questions come in, and I certainly addressed quite a few of them yesterday, and thought today it might be more appropriate to have the Chief of Staff address some of those questions specific to outreach to Gold Star families. He'll address questions on that topic, and if you have other questions throughout the day, the press staff will be here and happy to answer those after the briefing later this afternoon. Thanks, guys.
Well, thanks a lot. And it is a more serious note. So I just wanted to perhaps make more of a statement and an explanation, give more of an explanation than what amounts to be a traditional press interaction. Most Americans don't know what happens when we lose one of our soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, or Coast Guardsmen in combat. So let me tell you what happens. Their buddies wrap them up in whatever passes as a shroud, puts them on a helicopter as a routine, and sends them home. Their first stop along the way is when they're packed in ice, typically at the airhead, and then they're flown to usually Europe, where they're then packed in ice again and flown to Dover Air Force Base, where Dover takes care of the remains, embalms them, meticulously dresses them in their uniform with the medals that they've earned, the emblems of their service, and then puts them on another airplane linked up with a casualty officer escort that takes them home. A very, very good movie to watch if you haven't ever seen it is Taking Chance, where this is done in a movie HBO setting. Chance Phelps was killed under my command right next to me, and it's worth seeing that if you've never seen it. So that's the process. While that's happening, a casualty officer typically goes to the home very early in the morning and waits for the first lights to come on. And then he knocks on the door. Typically the mom and dad will answer, wife. And if there is a wife, this is happening in 2 different places. If the parents are divorced, 3 different places. And the casualty officer proceeds to break the heart of a family member and stays with that family until, for a long, long time, even after the internment. So that's what happens. Who are these young men and women? They are the best 1% this country produces. Most of you, as Americans, don't know them. Many of you don't know anyone who knows any one of them. But they are the very best this country produces. And they volunteer to protect our country when there's nothing in our country anymore that seems to suggest that self-service to the nation is not only appropriate but required. But that's all right. Who writes letters to the families? Typically, the company commander, in my case as a Marine, the company commander, battalion commander, regimental commander, division commander, Secretary of Defense, typically the service chief, Commandant of the Marine Corps, and the president typically writes a letter. Typically, the only phone calls the family receives are the most important phone calls they can imagine, and that is from their buddies. In my case, hours after my son was killed, his friends were calling us from Afghanistan, telling us what a great guy he was. Those are the only phone calls that really matter. And yeah, the letters count to a degree, but there's not much that really can take the edge off what a family member is going through. So some presidents have elected to call. All presidents, I believe, have elected to send letters. If you elect to call a family like this, it is about the most difficult thing you could imagine. There's no perfect way to make that phone call. When I took this job and talked to President Trump about how to do it, my first recommendation was he not do it. Because it's not the phone call that parents, family members are looking forward to. It's nice to do, in my opinion, in any event. He asked me about previous presidents, and I said I can tell you that President Obama, who was my commander-in-chief when I was on active duty, did not call my family. That was not a criticism. That was just to simply say, I don't believe President Obama called. That's not a negative thing. I don't believe President Bush called in all cases. I don't believe any president, particularly when the casualty rates are very, very high, that presidents call. But I believe they're all right. So when I gave that explanation to our president 3 days ago, he elected to make phone calls in the case of the 4 young men who we lost in Niger at the earlier part of this month. But then he said, you know, how do you make these calls? If you're not in the family, if you've never worn the uniform, if you've never been in combat, you can't even imagine how to make that call. But I think he very bravely does make those calls. The call in question that he made yesterday, or day before yesterday now, were to 4 family members, the 4 fallen. And remember, there's a next of kin designated by the individual. If he's married, that's typically the spouse. If he's not married, that's typically the parents, unless the parents are divorced. And then he selects one of them. If he didn't get along with his parents, he'll select a sibling. But the point is, the phone call is made to the next of kin only if the next of kin agrees to take the phone call. Sometimes they don't. So a pre-call is made. The President of the United States or the Commandant of the Marine Corps or someone would like to call. Will you accept the call? And typically they all accept the call. So he called 4 people the other day and expressed his condolences in the best way that he could. And he said to me, what do I say? I said to him, sir, there's nothing you can do to lighten the burden on these families. But let me tell you what I tell them. And let me tell you what my best friend, Joe Dunford, told me, because he was my casualty officer. He said, Kel, he was doing exactly what he wanted to do when he was killed. He knew what he was getting into by joining that 1%. He knew what the possibilities were because we're at war. And when he died, in the 4 cases we're talking about, Niger, my son's case in Afghanistan, when he died, he was surrounded by the best men on this earth, his friends. That's what the president tried to say to 4 families the other day. I was stunned when I came to work yesterday morning and brokenhearted at what I saw a member of Congress doing. A member of Congress who listened in on a phone call from the President of the United States to a young wife, and in his way tried to express that opinion. He's a brave man, a fallen hero. He knew what he was getting himself into because he enlisted. There's no reason to enlist. He enlisted. And he was where he wanted to be, exactly where he wanted to be, with exactly the people he wanted to be with when his life was taken. That was the message. That was the message that was transmitted. It stuns me that a member of Congress would have listened in on that conversation. Absolutely stuns me. And I thought, at least that was sacred. You know, when I was a kid growing up, a lot of things were sacred in our country. Women were sacred and looked upon with great honor. That's obviously not the case anymore, as we see from recent cases. Life, the dignity of life, was sacred. That's gone. Religion, that seems to be gone as well. Gold Star families, I think that left in the convention over the summer. But I just thought the selfless devotion that brings a man or woman to die on the battlefield, I just thought that that might be sacred. And when I listened to this woman and what she was saying and what she was doing on TV, the only thing I could do to collect my thoughts was to go and walk among the finest men and women on this earth. And you can always find them because they're in Arlington National Cemetery. I went over there for an hour and a half, walked among the stones, some of whom I put there because they were doing what I told them to do when they were killed. I'll end with this. In October, April rather, of 2015, I was still on active duty, and I went to the dedication of the new FBI field office in Miami. And it was dedicated to two men who were killed in a firefight in Miami against drug traffickers in 1986. A guy by the name of Grogan and Duke. Grogan almost retired, 53 years old. Duke, I think less than a year on the job. Anyways, they got in a gunfight and they were killed. Three other FBI agents were there, were wounded, now retired. So we go down, Jim Comey did an absolutely brilliant memorial speech to those fallen men and to all of the men and women of the FBI who serve our country so well and law enforcement so well. There were family members there. Some of the children that were there were only 3 or 4 years old when their dads were killed on that street in Miami-Dade. 3 of the men that survived the fight were there and gave a rendition of how brave those men were and how they gave their lives. And a congresswoman stood up, and in the long tradition of empty barrels making the most noise, stood up there and all of that and talked about how she was instrumental in getting the funding for that building and how she took care of her constituents because she got the money, and she just called up President Obama, and on that phone call he gave the money, the $20 million to build the building. And she sat down, and we were stunned that she'd done it. Even for someone that is that empty a barrel, we were stunned. But you know, none of us went to the press and criticized. None of us stood up and were appalled. We just said, okay, fine. So I still hope, as you write your stories, and I appeal to America, that let's not let this maybe last thing that's held sacred in our society. A young man, young woman going out and giving his or her life for our country. Let's try to somehow keep that sacred. But it eroded a great deal yesterday by the selfish behavior of a member of Congress. So I'm willing to take a question or two on this topic. But let me ask you this. Is anyone here a Gold Star parent or sibling? Does anyone here know a Gold Star parent or sibling? Okay, you get the question.
Well, thank you, General Kelly. First of all, you have a great deal of respect, Semper Fi, for everything that you've ever done. But if we could take this a bit further, why were they in Niger? What was, we were told they weren't in armored vehicles and there was no air cover. So what are the specifics about this particular incident, and why were we there? And why are we there?
Well, I would start by saying there is an investigation. Now let me back up and say, the fact of the matter is, young men and women that wear our uniform, are deployed around the world in their tens of thousands. Near the DMZ in North Korea, in Okinawa, waiting to go, in South Korea, in Okinawa, ready to go, all over the United States, training, ready to go. They're all over Latin America. Down there, they do mostly drug interdiction, working with our partners, our great partners, the Colombians, the Central Americans, the Mexicans. You know, there's thousands. My own son right now back in the fight for his 5th tour against ISIS. There's thousands of them in Europe, acting as a deterrent, and they're throughout Africa. And they're doing the nation's work there, and not making a lot of money, by the way, doing it. They love what they do. So why were they there? They're there working with partners, local Africa, all across Africa in this case, Niger, working with partners, teaching them how to be better soldiers, teaching them how to respect human rights, teaching them how to fight ISIS, so that we don't have to send our soldiers and Marines there in their thousands. That's what they were doing there. Now, there is an investigation. There's always an unless it's a very, very conventional death in a conventional war, there's always an investigation. Of course, that operation is conducted by AFRICOM, that is, of course, works directly for the Secretary of Defense. There is I talked to Jim Mattis this morning. I think he made statements this afternoon. There's an investigation ongoing. An investigation doesn't mean anything was wrong. An investigation doesn't mean people's heads are going to roll. The fact is, they need to find out what happened and why it happened. But at the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen, you have to understand that these young people, and sometimes old guys, put on the uniform, go to where we send them to protect our country. Sometimes they go in large numbers to invade Iraq and invade Afghanistan. Sometimes they're working in small units, working with our partners in Africa, Asia, Latin America, helping them be better. But at the end of the day, they're helping those partners be better at fighting ISIS in North Africa to protect our country so that we don't have to send large numbers of troops. Any other, someone who knows a Gold Star fallen person? John?
General, thank you for being here today. Thank you for your service and for your family's sacrifice. There has been some talk about the timetable of the release of a statement about I think at that point it was 3 soldiers who were killed in Niger. Can you walk us through the timetable of the release of that information, and what part did the fact that a beacon was pinging during that time have to do with the release of the statement, and were you concerned that divulging information early might jeopardize a soldier's attempt at E&E?
Yeah. First of all, that's we are at the highest level of the U.S. government. The people that will answer those questions will be the people at the other end of the military pyramid. I'm sure the Special Forces Group is conducting it. I know they're conducting an investigation. That investigation, of course, under the auspices of AFRICOM, ultimately will go to the Pentagon. I've read the same stories you have. I actually know a lot more than I'm letting on, but I'm not going to tell you. There is an investigation being done. But as I say, the men and women of our country that are serving all around the world. I mean, what the hell is my son doing back in the fight? He's back in the fight because working with Iraqi soldiers who are infinitely better than they were a few years ago to take ISIS on directly, so that we don't have to do it. Small numbers of Marines where he is, working alongside those guys. That's why they're out there, whether it's Niger, Iraq, or whatever. We don't want to send tens of thousands of American soldiers and Marines in particular to go fight. I'll take one more, but it's got to be from someone who knows. All right.
General, when you talk about Niger, sir, what does your intelligence tell you about the Russian connection with them, and what stories that are coming out now they're supporting?
No knowledge of any Russian connection, but I would not, in my position, know that. That's a question for Northcom or for, not Northcom, or AFRICOM or DoD. So, thanks very much. And as I walk off the stage, understand there's tens of thousands of American kids mostly, doing the nation's bidding all around the world. They don't have to be in uniform. You know, when I was a kid, every man in my life was a veteran. World War II, Korea, and there was the draft. These young people today, they don't do it for any other reason than their selfless sense of selfless devotion to this great nation. We don't look down upon those of you that haven't served. In fact, in a way, we're a little bit sorry, because you'll never have experienced the wonderful joy you get in your heart when you do the kind of things our servicemen and women do, not for any other reason than they love this country. So just think of that, and I do appreciate your time. Thank
Did the president authorize the mission, General Kelly? He doesn't do it.
That's it.
Happy Thursday and welcome to the Briefing Room on ABC. I'm John Santucci alongside Arlette Saenz and Justin Fischel. That was a very incredible moment we just saw in the briefing room. General John Kelly, the president's chief of staff, stepping in front of the podium. The second time we've seen him there, but a very different mission for the general this time. Of course, it's been a very long week over at 1600 with the president having to really deal with a situation that he basically got himself into here with talking about himself and former presidents calling the families of those who serve in our armed forces abroad. General Kelly, of course, as he mentioned, and does not often like to talk about, as we well know, lost his son as he was serving our nation abroad. And of course, some comments about that have kind of gotten the general pulled into this. A lot to dive into in a very short briefing than we had expected. This was really just an incredible moment. I mean, I think everyone here was just kind of glued to the TVs, Justin.
We were not expecting that. That, if you thought the last time he came out was dramatic.
And that was just a week ago.
This was high drama. Yes, his son died in Afghanistan in 2010, and he wanted to come out and specifically address this issue of President Trump comparing himself to other presidents by saying, look, I do the hard phone call. Well, Kelly's message was that, one, he recommended Trump not make those phone calls because it's so incredibly difficult, but that he talked to him about how to do it, and he thought Trump did it well. That was his message. His message was also that he was stunned about how it was interpreted by this Miami Congressman Wilson, who heard the phone call. She said it was insensitive. So Kelly went out there and gave his explanation of what the president was trying to do. And Kelly's message was incredibly powerful and emotional. What we're left to wonder is, was the president's?
I mean, that's something I don't think we're going to know right now. But to your point, an incredible, powerful moment talking about how he actually went to Arlington Cemetery and walked among the stones for an hour and a half, stones that he had actually placed there, he said in several instances. I want to actually go to the Pentagon where our reporter, Louis Martinez, who is always there for us, is stationed. Louis, you were watching that moment with us. What's your takeaways?
You're right. That was an overwhelming moment there from John Kelly in the White House briefing room, going into intimate detail about what happens with the remains of our fallen from conflict zones. Just amazing. He has, of course, that firsthand experience, not only as a commander, but as a parent, because he has seen that happen with the loss of his son, John, in Afghanistan in 2010. But just amazing detail to hear. As you said, I called the newsroom, and the newsroom was silent, I was told, because everybody was gripped just listening to him as he spoke. But, you know, he went in there just talking about the experience of what it's like, about what it's like to receive a message from a casualty officer, that it's really not so much the call from a president or a senior leader that matters as much as that interaction with the casualty officer. And just amazing detail there from him of what it's like. And yes, I too was struck by the fact that he said that on a very busy day yesterday, he took time off, an hour and a half, to go to Section 60. That is where most of the combat fallen from Iraq and Afghanistan are buried here in Arlington Cemetery. And he walked among the headstones. That is a very telling moment of how personally he takes this issue. And it's just amazing to watch.
And Louis, I mean, listen, for those who don't know, you have been over at the Pentagon for us. It seems like forever, but you know a lot about General Kelly. I was struck knowing him in his time as DHS in the White House to see him talking about his son and that experience. I mean, what was that for you, Louis? I mean, this is a man who is deeply private about what him and his wife went through when they lost their son.
No, you nailed it. He is an intensely private man when it comes to the situation surrounding his son. He doesn't want to talk about it much. I mean, he is active with the families of other fallen Marines because it is a common bond that they have. But he really hasn't talked about it. He's been very private in the sense of the circumstances about it. But he has talked about how he works with others in order to console others who have gone through this similar circumstance. But it's truly amazing here to watch somebody of his stature address something like this because, as you said, he's been here for a long time. I've known him as a commander here. I knew him as when he was a senior military assistant to the Secretary of Defense. Very personable, very approachable, but there were certain things that you couldn't talk with him. And I should also note that when he talked about the casualty officer, there was one thing that he didn't bring up, and that was his own personal experience. He was a senior ranking general. He's lost his lieutenant son in Afghanistan in combat. A very senior officer in the Marine Corps was sent to give him that news, to tell him that his son had fallen in Afghanistan. He doesn't talk about that much, and neither do other senior officers, but it shows you the level of respect and empathy that the military community shares with each other with a situation like this.
Catherine Falder is over at the White House for us. Catherine, as Louis was saying, it was a pretty quiet moment for us all here watching this. What was it like over in the briefing room today? Kind of very unexpected, obviously.
Really unexpected, and you saw there that Sarah Sanders didn't even take questions after General Kelly finished. But John, you kind of hit the nail on the head there. It was a powerful moment from General Kelly, a somber moment there in the briefing room. And as you guys were saying, this is something that General Kelly has made very clear that he doesn't want to talk about. He doesn't want to talk about his son who was killed in action. That's something that's very personal to him. So to have him here come out to the briefing room and deliver this powerful message was truly stunning for a bunch of us in the briefing room. But I would note that, General Kelly said that yesterday he went to Arlington National Cemetery to collect his thoughts on everything that was going on yesterday. The word that he used a lot in there was the word stunned at the congresswoman who came out and relayed some of the details of President Trump's phone call with the widow of Sergeant LaDavid Johnson. So, John, really a powerful moment in the briefing room, something we weren't expecting. I'm not sure if we'll see it anytime again soon, but powerful moment.
No, I think that is definitely a moment we're all going to remember. I do want to bring it back in here to the Bureau with Justin and Arlette. There are now questions mounting about what actually happened here, that this sergeant lost his life. One of four in total that were killed here. We don't really know a lot yet. Senator McCain was actually saying that it's possible he may have to subpoena for information to try to figure out what happened to these four men.
I know Justin's really been diving into this, and the Defense Department has said that they're launching an investigation on this. There's lawmakers up on Capitol Hill who have a lot of questions about how this ambush went down and what was involved in that, and those are questions that are going to continue likely until the Pentagon does come out and the White House does come out and explain some of the circumstances.
Right. And just for context here, the last family member he called was Sergeant LaDavid Johnson, who died in Niger. He was the last American soldier to be picked up 2 days after that firefight. And there's a lot of questions about why there was that delay, why this Green Beret unit was ambushed the way it was. Should there have been better planning? And what's so interesting about this is these are all very good questions. And what's also kind of sad about it is that we're just now asking about it since this whole issue has been politicized so heavily. We, the media, weren't asking these questions, at least on the same level. The members on the Hill certainly weren't asking these questions with the veracity that they're doing now. And, and Louis can talk more, and I think we should talk to Louis about what, Louis, if you could, reminding our viewers what we're doing in Niger, because that has been a big question surrounding the death of these four Americans as well.
That's right, Justin. It's about 1,100 American troops in West Africa. The bulk of them are inside Niger, mostly a desert country, vast desert country in the Western Sahara. It borders Mali. In Mali, they've had an Islamic extremist insurgency now for a couple of years. The French military has been fighting against them. The U.S., under the Obama administration in 2013, sent a team there to help out with the drone surveillance of reconnaissance mission to support the French military in that operation. Over the years, it's been continued and it's grown in size. There are now about 800 American forces there, but most of those are construction workers. They're building up a second drone base in the northern desert up there of Niger. And what they're doing as well is they also have these counterterrorism teams. Well, the people that do that, the training of foreign militaries around the world are Army Green Berets, and this is why you have that number of Army Green Berets inside Niger. They were there to train the local military in the fight against these Islamic extremists. Who were these Islamic extremists? Some of them are affiliated with Al-Qaeda, others are affiliated with ISIS. In this case, it appears that the attack was launched by 50 fighters from a group affiliated with ISIS, a group called ISIS in the Greater Sahara. So that is the situation. This is how long American troops have been there. It's not a well-known mission, but as we've seen, this is a continuation by this administration of the Obama administration's idea of by, with, and through, where we support local militaries in their fight against extremism.
We're going to be asking a lot more questions in the coming days, and I know, Louis, you and the gang over there at the Pentagon for us are going to be leading that charge. Thank you for joining us. Thank you, Catherine Faulders, for stepping up at the White House. Thanks to our team. That's going to do it for us today at the Briefing Room. We'll have much more always online at abcnews.com, and, of course, the latest tonight on World News Tonight with David Muir. For Justin Fischel and Arlette Saenz, I'm John Santucci. Enjoy your Thursday.